North American culture demands us to go, go, go all the time. More is expected of us at work and home than ever before. Most of our daily activities stimulate our automatic stress response. Once the stress response is triggered, our healing mechanisms are shut off. Sleep, digestion, and calm thinking is profoundly disrupted. In the DVD entitled Adrenal Health Stressed Out, Bev further expounds on how life choices can lead to adrenal exhaustion, how overall hormone balance can be profoundly affected, and how to reverse the process.
Welcome everyone to the Women's Health Series, where we'll be talking about endocrinology, that's all your hormones in balance, and how it affects us in our everyday lives. Today we're going to start with adrenal balance and looking at managing adrenal health with natural medicine. I always like to start with getting into the idea of the picture of somebody in vibrant health. So let's just start by looking at the picture of vibrant health so that we'll be able to then compare ourselves to it and see what we need to do to help ourselves. So really the picture of vibrant health is somebody that has abundant energy, that's jumping up out of bed in the morning and doing their everyday chores, getting through their day in a very natural and energetic way. And then at night, they're able to hit the pillow and go instantly to sleep, whereby they will have a very nice solid sleep and then wake up feeling refreshed and relaxed. So sleep is another part of health that's really, really important. Because if we don't have sleep, then we won't regenerate our organs, and then we won't be able to build up our bodies instead of continue to breaking down our systems, which we really do all day, is we sort of catabolize our systems, break down our tissues by using them. And then at nighttime is when our liver, our kidneys, and the rest of our systems go to work to be able to build those tissues back up again. So there's abundant energy, good sleep. We want to have good bowel movements. And as a herbalist, I could talk about bowel movements for more than an hour, but we'll try not to do that today. It's not as interesting to other people as it is to me. But really, bowel movements are important because it is a measure of how our elimination organs are working. Typically, if you have a regular, normal bowel, you should actually have a bowel movement every time you have a large meal. Now, I'm happy usually if people come in and they say they've had a bowel movement once a day. That's really good. And there's no straining, no constipation, or on the other side, too soft, or there's any diarrhea involved, or alternating from one to the other. So this is where bowel movements become a measure of how good our elimination is in our body. And elimination really starts at the tissues, but it also then goes into the liver and the kidneys, and then all of that goes into the bowels and releasing that from the body. The last thing that we want to talk about as far as vibrant health goes is the skin and the complexion. People always mention that people who look like they're in optimum or vibrant health have really good skin. And, you know, I find it really interesting because that just shows us what the wisdom that we have as far as understanding health at a deeper level. Because the primary organs of elimination are your liver, your kidneys, and your gastrointestinal tract, or your digestion. If those are under stress, what happens is that the secondary elimination organs have to take over. And those secondary organs of elimination are your lungs, your sweat glands, and your skin. So if you have sort of pallid skin, if it's not really looking very well as far as color, that usually means that those primary elimination organs aren't working very well. And in fact, if you have skin conditions like psoriasis or eczema or constant rashes, blotchiness, gray color, that usually means that those primary elimination organs aren't working properly. So what we would set to do is to try and help those elimination organs so that we can bring them back into health so that the secondary ones aren't working to pick up the slack. So as we spoke about, those factors that do maintain health again are the primary organs of elimination, starting at the tissues. We've got your kidneys, the liver, and the gastrointestinal tract. But the other ones that are really important are your immune system, the endocrine system, and the nervous system. So if your brain isn't working properly or the peripheral nervous system, then you'll see changes. As well, that immune system, if it's not working properly, it's going to have an effect on the nervous system and the endocrine system. So they all work in harmony together. And there's a really great book called The Molecules of Emotion. It's by Candace Pert. And she's a chemist. And what she did was do studies of the brain to show that, in fact, instead of the nervous system telling the body what to do and it being a one-way hierarchy, what actually happens is that the nerves, the immune system, and the endocrine system have a very intricate feedback loop. And they all talk to each other and adjust as necessary. So this is where the immune, the endocrine, and the nervous system all come hand in hand and have a big effect on your health, along with those primary elimination organs. If we look at the factors that keep us from health, really, if you were listening to the media today, you would think that genetics is the only part of health. We have people that are going out and having preventative mastectomies if they have breast cancer in the family. And that's a cue to me to say that this person really thinks that because of their genetics, they have a very big chance and they will get breast cancer. There is a speaker who's great to hear if you've ever get a chance. His name is Dr. Bruce Lipton. And he talks about the actual facts. Now we know through scientific experiments that perception can actually change your genetic code. And this is really important because what that means is if you actually close your eyes and visualize yourself in complete health, your physiology actually changes in your body so that it becomes healthier. So we can change it by our thoughts. So you know the old adage that things are in your head? Well, I say, yeah, everything's in your head. That's right, because you can actually change the process of disease. And in fact, when you do some of the literature searching about people who have recovered from a chronic life-threatening illness, they actually have said that it was their mind being made up that they were going to cure themselves that made the real difference. So that's genetics. Also around us, and you've heard it over and over again, that environmental toxins are crowding our world and they're getting worse and worse and we really can't escape it. And it's absolutely true. You know that toxins are in the air that we breathe, they're in the food that we eat in the way of preservatives, and they're also in the water that we drink. And so we really can't escape it. It really, really is something we can't do anything about. So what we have to do is try to manage those elimination organs to be able to minimize the toxins in our body. So keep them active so we're getting those environmental toxins out of our system. Also, there's a thing called spiritual wellness. And that may seem at the start a sort of a religious statement, but really what I'm trying to say is that in the past, people have stayed close to their families. They knew their community really well. And that gave people a lot of support for healing. And in First Nations medicine, in fact, it's very important that they look at the universe being healed. First, the earth, then the community, and then the individual. Before the individual can be healed, all those other things have to be in balance. Okay? And I think these days, the thing that's happened is that people are more mobile, they're moving around, they're separated from their family, or they don't have many friends in the area, and that makes them very isolated. And that can limit how well you can heal yourself because it doesn't give you as much support, and you can feel very alone in your situation. Also, what's very important is diet and lifestyle. And let's talk about diet and lifestyle a little bit more. There's sort of two categories that I split the diet and lifestyle into, and that's really if it's an emotional stressor or if it's a physical stressor. As far as emotional stressors go, if we look generally at our society, that our society really doesn't have an emphasis or a value on having balance. we celebrate our CEOs who make lots of money, or the richest people in the world, or we have a lot of emphasis on those kinds of people, the movie stars and this and that. There's nothing to say what the relationships are like. And so things like meditating may not be important, or taking days off. Even our language is all about people being lazy, or, we should push through to our second wind so that we can gain more energy and success. It's not that if you phone up and say, I want a day off, that the person is on the other end of the line is really going to understand, because society wants us to be more productive. And in fact, there's a lot of studies that talk about productivity and how, Canada is less productive than the United States, and, oh, gee, isn't that horrible? But really, we should look at the bigger picture and how healthy we are. So there's a lot of stress in our society to really push through, and it causes a lot of stressors. And we'll get into adrenal stress and how that manifests itself from a physiological point of view. Now, sleep, when it's disturbed, can cause a lot of problems because the body isn't being able to heal itself, as I discussed earlier. So stress, emotional stressors, can cause us to not sleep very well when we're thinking about what we want to do tomorrow, or how we didn't get done what we wanted to do yesterday, or how am I going to get all these things done, and then we're not having good quality sleep. Either having trouble getting to sleep, sleeping very lightly, or waking up really early in the morning. And these are all different types of sleep problems, but they'll all be lumped into one of the causes being from emotional stress. Now, if we look at physical stressors, because adrenal stress can be brought on by physical stress as well. So if we look at our diet, stimulants that we eat and drink, so coffee and chocolate, refined sugar, if you have any food intolerances, those all stimulate the immune system, would then cause the endocrine system to be off. Every time the immune system is triggered, the cortisol is raised. And cortisol is one of the markers for increased stress in your body. So every time you bring a food into the body that you're intolerant to, you could be triggering cortisol. Even though you may not have very many emotional stressors, you may have a lot of physical stress in your body because of cortisol production and because of food intolerance. And also, in physical stressors, I would lump in dehydration. Because people don't drink enough water, enough fluids, the tissues are actually stressed. And then also, you may have sleep deficits because of pain. If you're in constant pain in a joint or an inflammatory process, then it's going to disrupt your sleep. So this is where both emotional and physical stressors can lead or limit us being in that most vibrant or optimum health state. So let's look at one of the key points as far as the treatment of natural medicine goes. And that is really in defining symptoms and how we look at symptoms. In allopathic medicine, or the reductionist kind of method of treatment, when you have a symptom, a drug is usually given to make that symptom go away. It's called symptomatic treatment, and that's exactly how it works at your medical doctor's office. And some would say there's nothing wrong with that situation, and certainly from a symptom point of view, if that irritating thing goes away, it's great for you because now you don't have it anymore. But if we look at the role of symptoms in our body, symptoms are really a sign, a warning signal from our body that something's out of balance. It's going, hello, something's going on, I'm not feeling so great, you gotta fix me. And the key about symptoms is that you really want to look deeper into those constitutional areas to say what's wrong and how can we reverse it so that that symptom will go away. It's not as quick of a fix, but in the long run, it will bring the body back into balance so that the symptom will go away and you'll feel much better in the long run. Symptomatic therapy really doesn't have an end. If you're taking a symptomatic treatment, you will be taking that forever. And the problem with taking away your warning signal is that the underlying process of imbalance still goes on underneath, okay? And that's the danger. So let's just look at hormonal therapy as a whole. all the endocrine organs and how they work in concert with each other. Now, if we start with the thyroid is at your neck here as I swallow a little bit, thinking about it. It's a butterfly-shaped organ, and it produces a thing called T4, or thyroxine. Thyroxine is made in the thyroid, but it needs to be converted to the active form, or T3, in the liver. So the thyroid is a very essential organ as far as metabolism and temperature goes, and it's a very big part of making sure that your enzymes work properly in the body as well. So a very important part of your system. The next organ we want to look at is the ovaries in the women, and it produces estrogen and progesterone. And the ovaries are just a part of the whole picture of the endocrine organs. And you'd think by the way treatment's going on with women these days that the ovaries are really the only thing that matters in menopause. And it's just not true. That if we have the other organs out of balance, the ovaries are going to be bound to be out of balance at some point. So the ovaries are what produces our cycles, and it also allows us to reproduce. That's the basic function of the ovaries. Now, if we look at the adrenal glands, it's got a lot of work to do. It produces cortisol, it produces adrenaline. And adrenaline is really the one that we've all heard about, that adrenaline rush, is that short-term fight or flight response that we get when we're in a really traumatic situation, like we've been in a car accident or we've had a scare of some sort. Then that's when adrenaline kicks in. Now, after a period of time, if you're under continued stress, if the body stays in that sympathetic mode, that's when cortisol kicks in. It's the long-term adrenaline, if you like. And cortisol will be continued to be secreted while you're in that stressful mode, which most of us live in. It's just a fact. We're always in that mode, rather than having a balance of rest and repose, which is the rebuilding side of our system, and that fight or flight response. So cortisol is made by the adrenals, and as well in women, testosterone and aldosterone. Testosterone gives us our libido, and aldosterone balances fluid in the body. So you know when people are complaining about puffiness, I've got rings around my ankles, or I really feel like I'm just holding fluid everywhere in my hands, usually extremities, then that's usually a case of aldosterone not working properly. And then the next organ that I wanted to talk to was about the pancreas, and we'll be talking later about the pancreas and its role in insulin balance. The pancreas, there's certain cells called the islet cells in the pancreas that produce insulin. Now, the role of insulin is to balance blood glucose. And when we're in the fight or flight response, what happens is that insulin is suppressed, because we want all the sugar in our bloodstream that we possibly can. And in long term, that can cause a lot of problems. In the short terms, it's good. If we're in a stressful situation, we need energy, we've got some axe murderer chasing us, then we need to get away and have lots of glucose in our system. But in the long term, having too much glucose in the blood can be a detriment. So if we look at all these endocrine organs, they all work in a feedback loop with each other. It was described back in the 30s by an endocrinologist, and this fact has sort of been left behind, is that the organs all work in a feedback loop with each other. So if the adrenals are working really hard, the other ones will slow down to try and compensate. There's only so much base material to go around. So usually what happens, what I find in my experience, is that the adrenals get the lion's share of those base ingredients, because survival is our main goal, is to make sure that we're alive. Survival of the species, survival is what overtakes everything else. So it doesn't matter if you can make babies if you're under stress. It doesn't matter if your blood glucose is balanced. It doesn't even matter if you're hot or cold as far as thyroid balance goes. All those things don't matter when there's a perceived stress, because survival is the key. And that's what I've found, especially with the reinforcement of our society saying all this other stuff doesn't matter, balance doesn't matter. What we really need to do is get things done, get more done, get it done faster, and that is conducive to this fight or flight or sympathetic stress response in the body. So another important part of this is that through menopause, when the ovaries stop working, so menopause is when you stop your period, so really ovaries give up, what happens to those other hormones, estrogen and progesterone? I often ask people, well, where do you think, what do you think happens to those hormones when you go into menopause? Do they just stop working? Do you not make it anymore? Estrogen and progesterone are very important parts of our overall hormonal health, especially in women. Estrogen does a multitude of things beyond just producing babies or producing our periods. So when that goes away, the ovaries aren't working anymore. What happens is that the adrenals are meant to pick up the slack and make estrogen and progesterone as well. So if we look at the adrenals and what it has to do now, it has to make a lot of things. It has to make adrenaline, it has to make cortisol, aldosterone, testosterone, estrogen, and progesterone. That's a lot of jobs. And if we have a history of our adrenals being under stress, the chances are that it's not going to be able to keep up the slack. And at the time of menopause, I'm finding that menopause is much worse if your adrenal health is not as good as it should be. The shocking thing for me is that once I'm treating women who are in menopause and then they bring their daughters in for me to help them out, I'm finding that there are some women that in their 20s that already have adrenal fatigue and they're not even remotely close to being in menopause and their periods are already erratic. They've probably been put on some type of oral contraceptive to regulate their hormones, but that again is symptomatic treatment. Remember, it doesn't take away the problem. So, there's a lot of things that can go on that can cause imbalance early on that will affect us later on in life.